Everybody, welcome back to Shoe and Show. Thanks for joining us for this week. As always, we're taking a look at every single aspect of the footwear industry on the business side. Especially important today, Matt, considering folks are looking at higher costs than ever before, historically high costs. So how do you optimize what you're doing? How do you look at costing? How do you make sure that you're providing the best value to the customer and at the same time in a package that's aesthetic and pleasing and attractive? So as we get into this today, I think number one, I'm thankful our guest is joining us. I think it's like 7 a.m. his time. So he got up early just to do this to help us out. So first of all, really appreciative of that. But who we got today, Matt?
Yeah, super grateful for Justin Jaeger for getting up early from Trillora. You know, Trillora is a packaging company based in Portland, Oregon. And Justin, as we welcome you to the Shoe and Show, I've got to think your phone, like ours, is ringing off the hook with all the chaos and the potential movement of production. Walk us through, kind of give us a rundown of Trillora, but then walk us through the current environment that you're seeing and hearing from your customers.
Yeah, well, we do have a lot of questions and a lot of concern right now because there's so much uncertainty. And really what we do is we kind of manage the packaging part of the supply chain for folks that are making their products in Asia. And so a lot of the uncertainty that's happening with global production and global trade right now has everybody concerned about the way they can do things most efficiently. And we tend to help people with that because a lot of times packaging is one of the last things people think about, to be honest, in terms of, getting their products here. And a lot of times they'll outsource that the strategy about it or the control, the decision making about it to folks that are completely outside their organization. And what we really do is help people bring that transparency and control back to them in a way that makes things easier in case you do have to make big moves in terms of where you want to manufacture so that you have sourcing for all the different aspects of your product.
Walk me through, you're based in Portland, you're formerly Paxos, formerly Billerud, now Trillora. Obviously, we know why you're in Portland, but walk us through the importance of where you're located and some of the customers you engage with on a daily basis.
Yeah, so you talk about our deep roots. We've been here as in different sort of iterations for a number of decades, really, working with a lot of the great footwear producers that are here in Portland. And it's primarily how we got started is working on trading paper for different companies in China. And we've expanded our global footprint to other countries in Southeast Asia and all over the world to support different footwear producers around the world. Here in Portland, we work with a number of different companies, but the companies that we work with most that I believe are FDA members are places like Under Armour. We do the footwear for them. We also do work for Amer Sports, so Salomon, which is part of our European group as well. And we've been making boxes for people for, again, about 20 or 30 years at this point.
So tell me, you said, what you guys do is help people bring the control back inside the company. Because I think one thing that we've heard time and time again from you and others at our FDA events, and thanks for sponsoring those events and participating and help us kind of shed some light, is that people just aren't optimizing their box size properly. They're not always using the best packaging materials based on, like, maybe the factory they allow to do it. They say, okay, like, what's the cheapest box, right? And they don't consider the packaging, I don't even know the word, strength for if there's a return, right? Something like that. Yeah. So maybe take us through some of the problems you guys see when you walk in and you say, okay, Polk Footwear wants to work with you guys. I've typically allowed the factory to do it. Tell me why. What's my problem areas that you walk into and you typically see? Kind of discuss some of those, but kind of fill in the blank.
Well, that situation you just described is the most common situation that we see, really, is that we kind of talked about originally that packaging tends to be an afterthought for people. So a lot of times when they have a factory that's producing the footwear for them, let's say in China or in Vietnam, they will leave the packaging decisions in terms of sourcing up to that factory where they work with sort of local suppliers to make that happen. And what can happen, and what we've heard from a lot of both brands and retailers about it, is that they will send a specific set of specs that they need in terms of the packaging to that OEM in regards to the way that they source then the supply of the packaging. And what the OEM will do when they have a lot of detail about the specific aspects of the shoe in particular, right? Where they are very clear about the margins that they will use in terms of everything when it comes to laces, when it comes to soles, when it comes to all those different pieces, because that's something that a lot of the brands actually require. They require that level of transparency. But when they outsource that decision to the factory in terms of packaging, that factory then sometimes will take the ability to build margin with a packaging producer in their local neighborhood. So because the brand has then given over that control to the factory, that's where they lose control of a lot of their efficiency. And so what the OEMs can do from time to time, because they then have this power, is that they will make sure that they satisfy the minimum requirement of the specs, but then they can sacrifice things like quality, optimization, and other aspects of the packaging that will make an inefficient transport from Asia to the US. And as long as it's satisfying that minimum requirement, they think that they've done what they are ultimately required by the brand. But what we can do is come in and ensure that the quality and consistency is across the board on all the footwear, and that you are getting the most optimized packaging suite for all the different SKUs that you're putting together, and that you're not shipping air across the ocean, for example. That's something that is part of the control and transparency that we give back to
Matt, I think they call it accordion packaging.
Yeah.
When you do it wrong, it's accordion packaging going back and forth, right? Like, so.
With it. I mean, look, this notion on shrinkflation, right? You can't have blind optimization spots right now. You just cannot, right? We all know what shrinkflation looks like in our day-to-day lives, and there's a lot of economists talking about it right now with the threat of higher costs and then declining sales. I mean, the fact of the matter is, when you get a bag of chips, the family size, right? And you open it up, it's a third filled, and you get pissed. Like, what the? I mean, that's shrinkflation, but it can happen in footwear too, as companies look to maximize and build a little bit more margin space. If they have higher duty costs on goods, they're going to pull out materials, they're going to pull out features, they're going to try to lower their cost of the actual product. So as they bring it across the border, even if they have a higher duty rate, they're paying less in amount on those shoes. Now, and that's like the negative side of optimization right now based on cost pressures. But the positive side, which has been hiding in plain view this whole time, and we've talked about this for a long time, Justin, is that it's that shipping air part of it. And so, like, turning that over to your factory's cousin's, manufacturing facility down the street for packaging is probably not a good strategy right now if you're looking to build out those efficiencies. I mean, is that kind of what the value proposition is for you guys?
For sure. And when you consider that, that supplier, that person down the street is really looking at a unit cost of where they can save the most money on simple things like the materials in the packaging, or giving you a non-optimized suite that's there. But they don't consider the things like the master outer carton that all of your different box sizes are going to go into. So you end up with you start out with shipping the wrong sized shoebox, and you end up with shipping the wrong size cartons altogether, and you end up with inefficiencies at every stage of the process if you're not looking at the total cost of operating that entire setup.
What's it like today? I mean, we talk a lot about like digital design and things like that. Are you guys able to like digitize you're talking about the outer carton, but also like obviously we send the majority of our shoes in cargo ships, right? So you got a cargo container. Are you guys able to like map out digitally what that size is and like fill in like Tetris like fill in those things? Like, is that basically where we're at today?
It's weird. I mean, it almost sounds funny, right? Like it sounds like a joke that it's like Tetris, but it is exactly like that. And we have digital platforms where we can plan that sort of setup, and we can plug in the different size boxes to make sure that we are optimizing the full carton as it gets on freight from Asia to the US. So that is exactly how we do it. So really, we have a design and engineering team that gets to play Tetris all day with making sure that everything is optimized for shoe producers all across.
Well, that's all my questions. Once we hit podcast, that was all
wrong in my head, Andy.
We need a graphic of falling blocks, right? Yeah.
You're the one you can turn, like,
Yeah.
Let's talk a bit about there's a big thing happening in footwear with EPR and packaging, right? So I think, one of our and footwear is not really used to this, right? And so, when we're talking about like extended producer responsibility and like Oregon and all these other states are starting to come up with like packaging laws to like look at your excess waste and things like that. How do you guys look at that and kind of address that for your partners? Or, is because again, this is like an emerging thing, and I don't want to get technical on all the legal aspects, but it is something new, and we're starting to have to track like, all right, like we have this packaging. How do we track the number of packages we have in these states? Like, how do we start to think about that as an industry?
Well, that's part of that transparency and control that we can offer to a brand as well. And we're very serious about sustainability. It goes to our core of what we do. And we have a huge amount of compliance requirements that we make sure that all of our suppliers fulfill. And where we do that, we can offer sort of a clear chain of custody of where the product is coming from. And we can tell you, basically, we can report in a way that a lot of brands don't have visibility into today, the types of specific materials that are going into your packaging. And to some degree, we also have the ability to do a life cycle analysis in regards with carbon footprint and also water usage from our supplier base as well. And this is something that can be seen as revolutionary. It all depends now, company to company around the world, how they are tracking sustainability metrics, and different companies do it different ways. But if they see us as, for example, an indirect sourcing, which is most common, where we can report those aspects of what we do, a lot of that is seen as kind of a black box right now, that a lot of people don't have a window into that kind of sustainability to satisfy the regulations that you're talking about. Now, we see compliance for these regulations is wildly different around the world at this point. We see different regulations coming up in Europe. We see, because of how things are starting to fraction out in the US, we see different, like you mentioned, state to state, we see different regulations coming up. But what we can provide is a consistent idea of the way that we can report that for people.
That's a huge value proposition that people aren't calculating, right? They'll look at the cost, but they're not looking at the cost downstream, where a lot of companies now are having to hire someone to track different metrics, track waste, figure out how to report that waste to different states or different entities. Like, those are huge costs coming in that you could build back into, instead of having it come out of your line item, your P&L at the end of it, you're building that into your FOB with your packaging with someone, like Justin's company that can manage that and optimize it. So you're actually, instead of taking it out of your balance sheet, you're like putting it into your product, and there's a huge value to that, to be able to do that.
That's how we see ourselves too, right? We are so much more than just a box producer. We actually provide valuable data in the supply chain for brands and retailers that don't have it today. And we want to be able to do that in terms of sustainability, in terms of compliance, in terms of all the different things that go into the aspects of your supply chain that you can't see today. That's why people want to work with us.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is that the U.S. government's thrown us this massive curveball that's just made the value proposition even more valuable, if you will, in the sense that we are now, literally we're getting calls every hour. It's 10 a.m. East Coast time. I've already had 4 calls on classifications starting since 7 this morning. So it's, people are trying to figure out, if I go to this country and I bring in this and I do this, and there's going to be a lot of new frontiers, I think, that have had a couple trails that have been blazed, but some countries that may start to look more advantageous from a production standpoint to the U.S. market because they have less duties applied to them in comparison with a place like China. So you guys, I assume, you can correct me if I'm wrong, are kind of the tip of the spear and some of that as well. You're already on the ground in these countries. You can engage. And if you're going in a new country with a new culture and you're engaging with production there, you're going to quickly lose line of sight into how you can continue to optimize your product, particularly, I would suspect, with packaging. So it's like, why even deal with that and the hassle of that if you already have to figure out new suppliers in a new country, the new culture with shifting tariff rates? You might as well bring you guys along for the ride, because it's just one less thing you have to worry about.
Yeah, I mean, and that's really the biggest part of our value proposition is that we can take the concern about that sort of thing off your plate. It's something that we dealt with already to some degree during the pandemic when we ended up with a lot of freight just kind of sitting offshore and people couldn't figure out how to get product from Asia to the US. So we, because of our global footprint, because we're already established in some of these other countries, as you start making your strategy for how you're going to deal with the chaos that's happening right now, working with a company like us will give you the ability to shift things without having to worry about managing the quality and consistency of your packaging as you make those big global shifts, because we're already there. So that's kind of the nice thing there too. Engaging with us early helps make sure that that consistency and quality stays wherever you choose to go. And the decisions about that are changing day to day. You mentioned that the calls are coming up. I had a recent trip to China and Hong Kong where I was meeting with a lot of our brands, and many of them said, and this is at the beginning of April, had said, we're just holding everything because everything is changing every day. And the changes on tariffs, these things are really just kind of a modified fee structure for the way that they do business. And when they're optimizing their business, they're just waiting to make the decision on where to go. So working with a company like us will be spring loaded for when you do make that decision, that we can keep your supply chain going without delay.
So Justin will just put the packaging in his backpack and hop wherever you need him to get.
Exactly. Yeah.
Just strap on and show up whatever country.
We'll be there for you. Exactly.
With the Tetris theme song as you enter into a room. So
yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, I think, part of this again is when we're trying to focus on talking about these different topics across the supply chain, it still amazes me that there's still these companies that still allow factories to control this kind of aspect. And it's at the point now to where we're talking about the cost and the value where it just isn't feasible anymore. And it reminds me of like where we are today with managing our supply chains. Excel has been one of the world's greatest business tools, right? It has been. It still is a great business tool, but it simply cannot calculate the amount of data and things that we have to look at now across our supply chains. We need digital tools. We need partners that specialize in different aspects more than ever to help us make, key business decisions, Matt. Like we can't keep, it's good to have partners, but a factory should make a shoe.
Yeah.
Right. That's what they should focus on.
Know your role.
One of the mindsets that we run into a lot, like you said, it's surprising that kind of stuff is still out there. And it is such a complex environment today that working with a partner really helps you in this regard. What we've run into in terms of mindset is that because it's been done that way for so long, where the factory is sourcing it, a lot of brands and a lot of decision makers at brands really see that as them sourcing it internally, because it's their relationship with their factory. But the reality is you still are outsourcing when you're putting that decision on your factory to choose where your indirect sourcing of packaging is coming from. Yeah. So the idea about working with a provider such as us, and there's a number of different people in the industry, but working with someone where we can give you that control and transparency back is not the decision whether to insource or outsource. It literally is choosing the provider or the partner that can help you best. And a lot of people have been unwilling to look away from the status quo model of sourcing it to their factories. But what we're trying to help people understand is that we can return a lot of control, transparency, and efficiency to you if you consider working with a partner that specializes in doing those things for you, as opposed to, like you said, making the shoe, which is what their function is for you as a
make brand. The shoe.
Right.
Gotta make the donuts.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, Justin, we appreciate you coming on in and talk a little bit about this. And I know we'll see you and your colleagues more out in Portland in September. We'll see you and your colleagues in July.
We'll be there in New York.
Exchange for our sourcing summit where we'll continue these conversations. But it behooves folks as we look at these fees, costs, tariffs, everything. Tariffs are just the latest thing, right? COVID was just the latest thing. Supply chain challenges are going to keep happening, and so we've got to think a little bit differently about how we operate and the decisions we make and the partners that we have. And I mean, if you're looking at, obviously you wouldn't go make a shoe in an apparel factory. You shouldn't expect a shoe factory to make packaging, right? As well. So like,
Exactly.
let them
And what we really offer in the face of all these things is resiliency in your supply chain, where you don't have to change everything because we can stay with you regardless of how your strategy changes. And I think with this changing world, with what we saw in 2020 and what we're seeing today, this is the kind of thing that people really need. So when there are ways to make your supply chain more resilient, when there are initiatives for that, that's really the time to engage with us because we can help.
Absolutely. And folks, if you want to engage with Justin, just drop us a note, info@fdra.org, and we're happy to like introduce you to him and the Trillora team that can talk to you about packaging needs and issues. I always say, like, if you think you don't need it, number one, you do. But if always just reach out and talk and start the conversation. You don't have to make decisions right away, but figure out what the value proposition is and see where you're at. And it's always better to start now than later when you're behind the 8 ball. And unfortunately, in some ways, we are a little bit behind the 8 ball. But to my previous point, this is just the latest thing that we're having to deal with as a global supply chain. And there's going to be something else after the tariffs that come. So whether you do it now or you do it later, something's going to happen and you've got to optimize your business. So, Justin, thanks for coming on today. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you, guys. Can't wait to see you in New York.
Awesome. Folks, again, Shoe and Show. shoeandshow.com is our entire catalog of all our shows, of all our many years of Tetris-like jokes that you can find on all these episodes. We try to drop one zinger in every single episode. We don't always get it, but I always think about baseball. If you're hitting 3 of 10, then you're in the Hall of Fame. So
sometimes they're just hidden and they go above people's head. There's always one in there somewhere.
Somewhere in there, hopefully.
Yes.
Like, I'm not saying it's always good, but there's something in there, right? So,
Typically not good because it's like two dads, it's dad jokes.
that's all right.
We're gonna have to make some Tetris merch, and we'll bring it out at the events.
Now that would be next level.
That would be next level.
That's where we're going.
If you want to bring some tabletopers to any of the events, add some Tetris stuff. Now, even the Game Boys, let's get out some Game Boys with.
I don't know what the Russian IP laws are, but who cares?
Well, now the Portland Timbers MLS team here has a whole chant based around Tetris, where the whole Timbers Army, the whole fan section, bounces and sings in time. It's very thematic of what we do.
So thematic. Who knew? That's crazy.
Well, there you go. We never know how great we are, but we are pretty great at this. So
there you go.
Who knew? Just pulling it out. So, all right, folks. Next week, all new episode every single Monday. And by the way, we're launching over the last month or so. You'll start seeing more and more of this, the video version of our conversation. So whether you follow us on Instagram or LinkedIn or our YouTube channel, make sure you subscribe to those too. And
YouTube.org, man. It's as simple as that. YouTube.org.
How we roll. So, all right, with that, until next time, Shoe-In is out.
Shoe-In has been brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. For information about FDRA, visit fdra.org.